Hello, women in American history. Mr. V here. I'm going to be kind of wrapping up our assignment from last week, talking a little bit about the situation in regards to this lady right here, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who unfortunately passed away on September 18th, 2020. It's only been a couple of weeks, and yet it's still very much a hot button issue, and I want to explain why. Now, I had you look up the Supreme Court women, the women that have served on the Supreme Court, and if you remember, this was kind of the basis of my discussion the other day, but I've added a little to it to make sure you understand, now that you've done the assignment hopefully, and most of you have, so that you understand what the controversy is surrounding this, so that you understand this week exactly what is going on. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she passes away. That leaves a vacancy on the Supreme Court. Now, if you remember, the Supreme Court has 9 justices, all right? So when one passes away, when a position is open, that becomes an issue, because what if you get a 4-4 tie? You know, you need that 9th justice to provide a balance, if you will, or an imbalance, I should say, within the Supreme Court, especially as you're moving into the Supreme Court's year here. And they're going to be arguing a number of cases, and that's what is really driving this more than anything else. Okay? Now, to provide background, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, who was fairly liberal, she was a very liberal justice. She had been nominated by Clinton, so therefore she was left of center. If you remember from your government classes, we talked about the political spectrum. Since her judicial record had been somewhat liberal, replacing her with a conservative would certainly create an imbalance on the court towards the more conservative side. Now, this has been orchestrated by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell right here is the Senate Majority Leader. He's from Kentucky, a senator from Kentucky, and he basically has played this political game all the way through. Now, I want to preface this by making sure you understand that nothing that happens here, nothing that I explain, is unconstitutional. Everything he did was considered constitutional, okay? There are questions, though, as to whether or not it's ethical. And obviously that's a different issue entirely. The Constitution isn't a perfect document, and ethics and government, you can laugh all you want, but ethics and government don't always go along, and ethics are not a Democrat or Republican value at all, okay? In a lot of sense, power kind of trumps everything, forgive the pun. But McConnell comes in, and basically during his time period as Senate Majority Leader, he had been Majority Leader during Obama's time in office. Now, Barack Obama, way back in his last year in office in 2016, there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The vacancy was left because of the death of Justice Antonin Scalia. Antonin Scalia was considered one of the most conservative justices on the Supreme Court. Now, Obama in February of 2016 still has about a year left in his presidency, but it's an election year. So when Antonin Scalia died, Obama puts forth his candidate, his nominee for the Supreme Court, and it was this guy right here named Merrick Garland, okay? And you can see, of course, Joe Biden is standing next to him clapping, so this is very much a Biden-Trump issue right now. So Merrick Garland is put forth as Obama's nominee. Now, according to the Constitution, the president has every right to put forth a nominee. In fact, that is his job. That's what he has to do. So when Obama put forth his nominee, he was being very constitutional as well. Now, the question then, in 2016, was what was McConnell's job? Now, according to the Constitution, the job of the Senate is to vet, to look into, and investigate and interview the nominee from the president. The thing about it, though, is in the Constitution, there's no timetable to do that. They didn't say, hey, Justice Ginsburg dies, or Justice Scalia dies, or, a Supreme Court justice dies, or somebody resigns, you've got a month to fill the vacancy. There's nothing in there that provides a timetable, an expectation. So the president nominated Merrick Garland, and McConnell just sat on the nomination. He didn't do anything. He said, you know what, it's an election year, I think we should leave it up to the voters, okay? So he basically played the constitutional game here that since the Republicans controlled the Senate and Obama's a Democrat and Obama's going to replace a conservative justice with a liberal justice, he basically said, I'm just going to ignore it. He didn't allow the Justice Committee, Judiciary Committee, I should say, in the Senate to even proceed with it. So Merrick Garland didn't even get his interview. He was never invited to the Senate to have a hearing, which a lot of Democrats said, hey, while the Constitution may not be written that way, you're still violating by not doing your job, by not doing what the Senate is supposed to do. McConnell said, I'll leave it up to the voters. Now, most of the Democrats said, fine, we'll just wait. Because at the time, Donald Trump was behind in the polls, and it looked like Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president of the United States. Lo and behold, in November, who gets the nominee, or who gets it? Trump. Now, here's the thing. Merrick Garland is considered to be somewhat middle of the road. He's not extremely liberal as a justice. Obama had put him out there because he figured, well, he's kind of liberal in his judicial thinking, and maybe I can sneak him through the Senate in an election year, okay? So it's not like he's an extreme left-wing ideologue. He's not going to be right. Let's put it this way. Merrick Garland's not going to be front and center at a Bernie Sanders rally, okay? Not that Bernie is, crazy out there, way out there, but in our arguments here, out of all the presidential candidates on the left, Bernie Sanders would arguably be one of the more liberal. It's not like Merrick Garland and Bernie Sanders are buddies here, okay? Bottom line is Merrick Garland is considered somewhat centrist, okay? But he gets ignored. So poor Merrick Garland is still sitting, and he still has his job. He's still on the D.C. circuit, if you will. So he sits, sadly, he has to walk to work by going by the Supreme Court building almost every day. And so Merrick Garland gets nominated. He'll always have that he was nominated to the Supreme Court. And maybe down the road he still gets nominated, but as each passing year keeps going, it looks less and less likely. So Merrick Garland may be one of the most well-known judiciary footnotes in American history just because of this whole situation. Needless to say, McConnell sits on the nomination, and Trump gets elected. Now, when Trump gets elected, he now has the right to select the next judicial appointment. He ignores Garland, throws that one in the trash, and then he nominates a guy named Neil Gorsuch. Now, Neil Gorsuch is widely considered to be somewhat conservative, so of course McConnell got what he wanted. He got a conservative to replace a conservative. Then Anthony Kennedy resigned. He decided that he was going to retire, and when he retired during Trump's time in office, Trump then put on the court a guy named Brett Kavanaugh, also considered to be fairly conservative. So Trump has kind of kept, when you hear Trump supporters say, hey, he made promises that he kept, that's one of the major ones that many people voted for, okay? So Trump has done that for his base. Now you have a liberal justice going away. With Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying, you now have a liberal going away, okay? And to give you kind of an idea of what that means, okay, you have on the Supreme Court, there are some liberal justices, and the liberal justices on the Supreme Court are a guy named Stephen Breyer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the court, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. Those were considered the liberals on the Supreme Court. These two were Clinton appointees, and these two were Obama appointees. Now, of course, the Obama fans out there are going to say, man, Obama should have had 3. He only got 2. He got screwed. And of course, you can have that argument all you want, but that's the reality is that's what ended up occurring. Now, on the conservative side, there is Justice Clarence Thomas, who was nominated by Bush 41. There's John Roberts. Now, John Roberts is considered the Chief Justice. That is his job. He was nominated by Bush 43. You have Samuel Alito, who was also Bush 43. And then, as I said before, you have Neil Gorsuch, and you have Brett Kavanaugh. All right, so accordingly here, with Trump getting his 2 nominees in so far, there is a 5-4 majority in the Supreme Court. Now, what is the fear? The fear of liberals is that with a 5-4 Supreme Court, you're now going to have issues with abortion, you're going to have issues with gay marriage, you're going to have issues with electoral policies and procedures, that you're going to have a very conservative Supreme Court. And what happens if we do elect, let's say, Joe Biden, and the Democrats get the Senate or something like that, and they start pushing forward legislation that they want? Couldn't the Supreme Court look at that and say, well, no, that's unconstitutional, and cancel out everything they do? So that's why there's such a controversy and they're so heated about this, is because of judicial review. these folks here can cancel out anything that happens. Now, where does this get really, really complex? Well, they now have lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, so the liberals are looking at this reality where Ruth Bader Ginsburg is now gone. There are only 3 liberals on the Supreme Court, and now you're replacing one of the most liberal with this woman right here, okay, Amy Coney Barrett. Which would mean that Donald Trump would have put, in just 4 years, Donald Trump would have put 3 Supreme Court justices on. Now, why does this matter? We're only 2 months away from the election, less than that, mind you. Okay, we are closer to the election this time around, and yet Donald Trump is getting his nominee. Now, people that look at this will say, okay, well, it's constitutional, but it's still wrong. You know, McConnell said, hey, the election should decide that. Now, why is McConnell moving forward? McConnell is saying, hey, we had an election in 2018, and you reinstalled a Republican Senate to go along with a Republican president, so therefore, since they're both Republican and they went in front of the electorate, they wanted a Republican president, they wanted a Republican Senate, so therefore, we get our nominee. Now, the Democrats are crying foul, and they can cry it all they want, but the Republicans are leaning on the Constitution, saying this is how the system works. Now, again, you can go back and forth and say this is unconstitutional, this is wrong, whatever else, and of course you can have that debate. It depends on how you read the Constitution, of course, but this is where it comes from. Now, Amy Coney Barrett is, she graduated Rhodes College, went to Notre Dame to get her Juris Doctorate. That's where she got her law degree, is what that means. She worked as a lawyer and has argued a case in front of the Supreme Court. The high irony is that the Supreme Court case that she argued was actually the Supreme Court case that ended the 2000 election cycle. She worked for George W. Bush. She was one of George W. Bush's lawyers in Bush v. Gore in 2000 that basically ended the recounts that were happening and allowed George W. Bush to become president of the United States. She took her legal training, if you will, and she took her legal resume, if you will, and turned it into a professorship. And she went back to her alma mater of Notre Dame and worked as a professor, where she has published all manner of papers and things on the law. Now, the things she has published, and this is what the media is doing right now, they're reading through everything, and they're coming up with a list of things that she wrote about that would be considered conservative. She has written about abortion and Roe v. Wade. She has written about the Affordable Care Act. She has written about electoral politics and procedures. She has written about welfare. She has written about a number of things that Democrats worry about in regards to the Supreme Court and in regards to court fights. So this is something that they're concerned about because she has written things, and most of the things she's written would be considered conservative. She currently is on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which means since she is currently a judge, they also have a legal record to go off of. They have seen what cases she has heard. They have seen what cases she's decided upon. So there is a legal record of her. And look, is she highly qualified to be on the Supreme Court? Absolutely. What is going to stand in her way? Possibly how she answers questions. So here's how it moves going forward. Over this weekend, Donald Trump said, this is my nominee. So Amy Coney Barrett, I'll get it right someday, Amy Coney Barrett is going to go up in front of the Senate. Now, Lindsey Graham, who's in charge of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has already committed that they're going to, fast forward this through his committee, which is highly irritating to the Democrats again, because Lindsey Graham has said very publicly in the past that elections should determine this. So again, people are saying, hey, where are your principles? They're explaining it from the standpoint of, well, the election already did happen, but you can maybe see where a lot of this yelling and screaming is coming from, because while it may be legal what they're doing, this is very much is it ethical? Is it the right thing to do? And of course, it depends on how these senators all come down. Now, some senators have said, absolutely, we are going to vote on our party lines. One of them is, both of them, I should say, are your senators. Sherrod Brown on the Democratic side is committed that he is going to be against this regardless of what happens. And he's made it very clear it's not against anything about this woman in particular. It's about the position being taken. Whereas Rob Portman on the other side, a Republican, even before she was nominated, had committed to whoever Donald Trump puts out there that he's going to be pushing for their acceptance onto the Supreme Court. Okay, so this is going to get very, very dicey, and it might have political implications down the line for both Sherrod Brown and for Rob Portman when they run for re-election in 2 and 4 years. Okay, so again, this is a bigger issue than just right now, because it's really the interpretation of the Constitution, your principles, and whether or not you're following a pretty standard principled line of thinking. Okay, so again, this is very controversial for those reasons, because it has far-reaching issues. Now, in reading some of the analysis of this woman has been presented very much as a troublesome nominee because she is a minority, obviously, for being a woman. Okay, so Trump has nominated another woman to the Supreme Court, and as I showed you last week, there's only been 4. So this woman being nominated, if she gets confirmed and becomes a Supreme Court justice, she would only be the 5th Supreme Court justice, and she would be the 3rd that is on this current Supreme Court with Kagan and Sotomayor. Okay, she becomes problematic because she is a judge and she also has legal training as a professor, very similar to Elena Kagan. Kagan had no judicial experience whatsoever, but was a professor, whereas a number of these others had never been a professor, but had served as a lawyer or had served as a judge before. So she kind of brings the full package to what you would expect in a Supreme Court justice. She has the legal training, she has the pedigree, she even clerked for people in the Supreme Court. What is really going to be on display over the next couple of weeks here is her judicial philosophy, and that's really what it comes down to. How is she going to rule in certain cases? Is she going to be the judge that swings the court to overturn Roe v. Wade? Is she going to be the judge that helps to challenge the Affordable Care Act, which is widely known as Obamacare? This is why this becomes so controversial, is because if you're somebody that supported Barack Obama, you're concerned that she's going to come in and kind of wipe out a lot of his legacy, not her personally, but the Supreme Court in general. And then, of course, you have people who are Trump supporters who are saying that's what we wanted. At the same time, is this going to have far-reaching implications down the road? What happens if Biden becomes president and maybe the Democrats take over the Senate? Will this Supreme Court end up blocking a bunch of things that the Democrats want to get done? So then, by extension, Trump would still have influence even though he's not in the White House anymore. Because again, he would have 3 Supreme Court justices that he put on the bench that are going to be influencing policies and procedures moving forward. And remember, a Supreme Court justice is a lifetime appointment. Okay, this is somebody that's going to be serving on the Supreme Court from now until they die or retire. So this is a big deal, okay? It'll be interesting to see how this goes moving forward. And a number of people I've also seen on the internet, people concerned that what happens if the election on November 3rd, let's say she does get confirmed and there's a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, conservative versus liberal. What happens if on November 3rd there's questions about legitimacy of ballots, there's questions about the Electoral College, there's questions of whether or not, let's say Biden wins, but there's some issues and there's some technicalities in some of the states reporting their ballots, and Trump says, hey, I'm suing, and I'm saying I would have won those states if it wasn't for these technicalities. What happens if the Supreme Court says, yep, he's right, he gets to be president of the United States again? Now again, it's not that simple, and of course it would be way more complex and problematic moving forward. But again, this is why right now this is becoming so passionate and problematic to us right now, okay? I just wanted to give you a brief synopsis. I know it's not brief, but give you an idea of why I had you do the assignment last week, why we're talking about politics currently, because, and I know some of you kind of wrote to me and said, why are we talking about Trump so much? Trump is president, so we are going to be talking quite a bit about Donald Trump, but we'll be talking about the election moving forward because that's kind of what's happening in the here and now. This is very specifically towards women in American history because you are having Ruth Bader Ginsburg being replaced by another female judge. This is the first time in American history that a female would theoretically be replacing a female on the Supreme Court. So this would have far-reaching implications towards our course of study as well. I'll be on later on to give you your weekly announcements and give you an idea of what you're doing this week. Again, a reminder, if you need to get some of your work turned in from previous weeks, you're going to start getting assessed penalties for being late. So please make sure that you are getting those done on time. All right, folks, have a good week, and I'll see you next week with another update on women in American history.